The stars above Earth twinkled quietly in the dark void of space, but down below, on the surface of the planet, something huge was happening. Humanity was about to take a step no one could have imagined. After decades of peaceful exploration, Earth had become the center of attention for not only the galaxy's brightest minds, but also its most feared and powerful leaders. The Galactic Senate had sent a message, an ultimatum, that Earth could not ignore. It had come down to this. Humanity was being sent on a mission to explore a planet unlike anything anyone had ever seen, a planet so dangerous that no one had dared to approach it in centuries. It was said to be a place of nightmares, where the environment itself would fight back against anyone who dared to land. But there was no choice. The Senate was certain that if humanity could survive, the ship's sensors began to pick up strange signals as they neared the planet's orbit. No one had ever been able to study this planet up close, so these signals were unexpected. They were faint and irregular, almost as if the planet itself was alive, trying to communicate or warn them. The scientists aboard the ship exchanged nervous glances, but the decision was made. They would land and collect data no matter what. There was no turning back now. The Solarius broke through the planet's atmosphere with a violent shake. The air grew heavy, and the view outside the ship's windows became distorted, covered by clouds and constant storms. There was no sign of life, nothing but unrelenting chaos below. They were entering a world that had been untouched by life for centuries, or so they thought. "Prepare for landing." Alex's voice rang out sharply. The ship shuddered as it descended, the atmosphere shaking them with every passing second. The planet's surface was now close enough to see in all its terrifying detail. Jagged mountains, vast oceans of molten lava, and swirling winds that tore across the planet's surface made it appear more like a monster than a planet. "We're almost there," Alex muttered to himself, his fingers gripping the control panel. "Let's see if we're ready for this." The ship finally touched down with a jarring thud. Silence filled the ship, broken only by the sound of the crew members exhaling in relief. They had made it. But as the door opened and the crew stepped out onto the planet's surface, the true test was about to begin. The crew stood in awe and fear as they looked at the vast, empty land ahead. This was the beginning of the most dangerous mission humanity had ever undertaken. But would they make it out alive? The crew stood in silence, gazing out at the landscape before them. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the wind howled like a living creature, carrying with it the faint scent of sulfur. This was no ordinary planet. They had known it was dangerous, but standing there, feeling the weight of its hostility, they began to realize just how dangerous it truly was. Commander Alex Williams adjusted the collar of his suit, his breath shallow as he stared into the storm clouds that churned above them. The atmosphere felt alive, as if the planet was watching them, studying them. He knew that the mission's true purpose was not just to survive, it was to conquer. The Galactic Senate had sent them here for a reason, to prove humanity's strength and resolve. But looking at the landscape, Alex felt a sinking feeling in his gut. Could humanity really withstand this? Was the Senate making a mistake? Behind him, the crew was preparing for their descent. They worked quickly, checking their equipment and securing their suits. The Solarius had landed in a vast, open expanse, with jagged rock formations stretching for miles. They were on a planet that no one had dared explore in centuries, a place that had been abandoned by even the bravest explorers in the galaxy. "Commander, the atmospheric readings are fluctuating again," said Lieutenant Emily Sharp, the ship's lead scientist. She adjusted the monitors, her face pale. "It's almost as if the planet itself is reacting to our presence." Alex frowned, his grip tightening on the controls. "Keep an eye on it. We need to get the data we came for, and fast. Prepare for the next phase of the mission." As the crew began to assemble, Emily continued to monitor the sensors. There was something strange about this planet, something that felt wrong in a way that words couldn't quite describe. It wasn't just the violent storms or the deadly winds. It was a sense of unease, an invisible presence that hovered in the air. It was as if the very ground beneath them was alive, waiting for them to make a mistake. "Everyone, stay alert," Alex ordered. "We don't know what's out there. This is a recon mission first and foremost. We're not here to fight. Stay focused." The crew nodded, though there was a shared sense of doubt in their eyes. They had come here expecting a tough but manageable mission, but now the reality of their situation was sinking in. The planet was more than just hostile. It was an active threat. The team began to venture out into the harsh landscape, their boots crunching against the brittle, volcanic soil. The terrain was treacherous, with sharp cliffs and jagged rocks that seemed to spring from the ground without warning. There were no signs of life, not a single plant or animal in sight. But the crew's every step was met with an eerie stillness, as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting. Alex led the team as they trekked deeper into the alien world. His eyes scanned the horizon, looking for any signs of movement. But all he saw was the same barren wasteland. It felt like they were walking into a void, a place where time and space were twisted beyond recognition. The wind howled louder, and Emily's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander, you need to see this." Alex motioned for the team to follow him as he made his way toward Emily's position. She was standing beside a massive rock formation, her fingers running over the surface. She turned to him, her face full of disbelief. This isn't natural." The rock was smooth, almost too smooth. It looked carved, but by what? The patterns etched into the surface were unlike anything they had ever seen before, complex and intricate, almost as if they were trying to tell a story. But the symbols didn't belong to any known language. Alex knelt down, inspecting the markings closely. They seemed to pulse with an eerie glow, faint but noticeable. It was as if the rock was alive, or perhaps the planet itself was communicating with them in ways they couldn't yet understand. "We need to get samples," Emily said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. This could be important. Before Alex could respond, a low rumble shook the ground beneath them. The crew stumbled, trying to steady themselves against the sudden tremor. The wind picked up again, more forceful this time, sending rocks tumbling across the barren landscape. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the crew instinctively reached for their weapons, their senses heightened. "Move. Get back to the ship," Alex shouted. But it was already too late. From the shadows of the towering cliffs, something massive stirred. It was difficult to make out at first, just a dark shape moving in the distance. But as the shape drew closer, the crew's worst fears began to take shape. A massive creature, taller than any of them had ever seen, emerged from behind the rocks. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its body was covered in thick armored plating. Its claws were sharp and glistened with an eerie sheen. This was no ordinary predator. It was a nightmare brought to life, and it was heading straight for them. "Everyone, fall back," Alex shouted, but it was too late. The creature lunged, its massive jaws snapping shut with a terrifying roar. The crew scattered, trying to avoid its deadly reach. The planet had just revealed its first deadly secret. Chaos erupted as the creature lunged at the crew, its enormous claws swiping through the air, cutting through the dust and debris with terrifying speed. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he instinctively reached for his weapon, a plasma rifle that he knew wouldn't be enough to stop this beast. The creature's massive form was like a dark shadow, moving faster than anything of its size had the right to. "Get to the ship. Now," Alex screamed, pushing Lieutenant Sharp in front of him, his eyes frantically scanning for an escape route. The ground beneath their feet rumbled as if the planet itself was shaking with rage. The air was thick with tension, crackling with energy as the creature closed in. Alex fired his plasma rifle, sending bolts of blue energy straight at the creature's armored hide. The shots bounced off harmlessly, only drawing the creature's attention closer. A deep guttural growl escaped the creature's throat as it turned, locking its glowing eyes onto Alex. He could feel its gaze piercing through him, as if it were assessing its prey. The air around them grew colder, and a strange, unsettling chill crept down Alex's spine. "Commander," Emily's voice cut through the panic. She had barely managed to get to her feet and was now sprinting toward the ship, the others close behind. "It's not stopping. What do we do? We can't outrun it." Alex snapped, his voice strained. He quickly assessed their situation. The ship was still 100 meters away, too far to make a safe dash with the creature in pursuit. They needed a plan, and they needed it now. Alex glanced around, his mind racing. The terrain was rocky and uneven, the jagged cliffs providing little cover. But there was a narrow canyon to their left, a small passageway that could give them a few moments of respite. It wasn't much, but it was their best shot. "Follow me," Alex barked. Into the canyon. Without waiting for a response, he turned and sprinted toward the narrow opening in the rocky landscape. His boots slammed against the hard earth, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The crew followed, their legs moving on instinct, the weight of the planet pressing down on them. Behind them, the creature roared, its primal fury echoing across the desolate plain. Alex could hear its heavy footsteps pounding the ground as it chased them, faster now. The canyon was their only hope. They reached the entrance to the canyon just as the creature reached the clearing. It was too close. Alex's heart raced, his mind focused entirely on the narrow gap ahead. They couldn't afford to be caught out in the open, not with the creature so close behind. "Move, move, move," Alex yelled, pushing the others forward. The crew squeezed into the canyon, the walls on either side rising sharply. The air inside was cooler, but it was far from safe. The creature's growls were growing louder, the ground trembling with every step it took. Alex kept pushing forward, desperate to put more distance between them and the nightmare on their tail. They rounded a sharp bend in the canyon, and for a brief moment, Alex thought they might escape. But then the walls of the canyon narrowed even further. They had reached a dead end. Damn it. Alex cursed under his breath. They were trapped. The creature's growls echoed as it closed in, the sound reverberating off the walls. They had nowhere to go. Alex's mind raced for options, but none were forthcoming. The canyon was too tight for them to fight back effectively, and the creature was too large to outmaneuver in this confined space. "Commander, what do we do?" Emily's voice trembled with panic, her eyes wide with fear. The creature was almost upon them. Alex quickly scanned their surroundings. There had to be something, anything they could use. But the canyon was barren, save for a few loose rocks and boulders, nothing that could stop the creature. They were out of time. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air, followed by the sound of massive stone grinding against stone. The ground shook once more violently this time. The creature paused, its growl turning into a confused snarl. Alex's eyes darted to the rock above them. A section of the canyon wall had begun to crack, and pieces of it were starting to loosen. He had no idea what had caused the shift, but he didn't need to know. This was their chance. "Everyone, get under cover," he shouted. Now, he pushed Lieutenant Sharp and the others into a small crevice in the canyon wall, pulling himself in after them. The creature, distracted by the tremors, hadn't noticed the danger. It had just started to move closer again when the ground gave way. With a thunderous roar, the top of the canyon wall crumbled. A massive boulder, dislodged by the tremors, came crashing down, slamming into the ground and blocking the creature's path. It screeched in frustration, its claws scraping against the rock, but it couldn't move forward. Alex exhaled a shaky breath, his heart pounding in his chest. They were safe, for now. "We're not out of the woods yet," he muttered, looking at the others. They were all shaken, covered in dust and grime, but they were alive, and they weren't going to give up. The creature's growls faded into the distance, but Alex knew this wasn't over. The planet had shown them its first challenge, And it wouldn't be the last. "Let's get back to the ship," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "This mission is far from over." The crew stood panting in the narrow canyon, their backs pressed against the rocky walls as they caught their breath. The sound of the creature's growls had faded, but its presence still lingered in their minds. The harsh reality of the planet's dangers was sinking in. Alex knew they couldn't afford to rest for long. They needed to regroup and move fast. "Commander," Lieutenant Sharp said, his voice tense. "What now? We can't just wait here. We need to find a way off this damn rock." Alex nodded, his mind racing. They'd made it through the first major hurdle, but the planet had already shown them how dangerous it could be. If they were going to survive, they needed more than just brute strength. They needed a plan. "We need to reach the ship," Alex said. "But we also need to understand what we're dealing with. The creature back there was just one of many threats this planet has to offer. We can't keep reacting like this. We have to know more about what we're up against." Emily, still breathing heavily, wiped the sweat from her brow. "You think the planet's alive?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "I don't know yet, but something's not right. I've never felt energy like this before." The air itself seemed to hum with a strange vibration, something that made Alex's skin crawl. It wasn't just the planet's surface they had to worry about. There was something deeper, more insidious at play. They gathered their gear, preparing to make their way back to the ship. The canyon was no longer a safe haven, and staying there too long was a risk they couldn't afford. As they moved, Alex's thoughts turned to the creatures they had already encountered, and the strange feeling that had settled over him since landing. It was as if the planet itself was alive, watching, waiting. As they navigated the rocky terrain, something caught Alex's eye, a faint, almost imperceptible glow emanating from a nearby cave. The light was eerie, a soft blue that seemed unnatural against the backdrop of the planet's red, dusty surface. "Over there," Alex pointed. "That cave. Something's in there." The crew exchanged wary glances, but there was no turning back now. If they were going to survive, they had to uncover every secret the planet held. Slowly, they approached the cave, their steps cautious, every sense on high alert. As they entered the cave, the air grew colder. The strange hum from earlier seemed to pulse in time with their footsteps. Alex felt a shiver run down his spine, but he pushed it aside. He had a job to do. The cave was smaller than he had expected, but as they ventured deeper, the glow grew brighter. It wasn't a natural light, but it didn't feel entirely man-made either. The source was hidden, and Alex could sense there was something more to it. "Stay alert," Alex warned, his voice low. The narrow passage opened up into a larger chamber, and that's when they saw it. An enormous stone structure, unlike anything Alex had ever seen before. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols that seemed to pulse with energy, as though alive. "What is this place?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Alex replied, his eyes narrowing. "But it's not natural. Someone built this." Lieutenant Sharp approached the wall cautiously, tracing his fingers over the markings. The symbols seemed to shimmer under his touch, like they were reacting to his presence. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook again, stronger this time. "Everyone back!" Alex shouted, but it was too late. A blinding flash of light filled the chamber, and before they could react, the symbols on the wall began to glow intensely. The air vibrated with a deep, resonant hum that rattled their bones. Alex tried to shield his eyes from the light, but it was too powerful. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light faded. The humming stopped. The crew was left in stunned silence, their eyes adjusting to the darkness that followed. "What the hell was that?" Lieutenant Sharp breathed, his voice shaky. Alex stood frozen, his mind racing. He felt a strange pull, like the cave itself was calling to him. But why? What had just happened? "I don't know," Alex said, still processing. "But I think we just triggered something. Something important. Emily stepped forward, her eyes scanning the symbols now visible in the dim light. "Look," she said, pointing to a section of the wall. "The markings, they're changing." Indeed, the symbols were shifting, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. Alex felt a sudden rush of understanding. "This isn't just a cave," Alex said slowly. "This is a message." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. If the planet was sending them a message, then they were far from being the ones in control. Alex didn't know what the message meant yet, but he was certain of one thing: it wasn't just a warning. The planet was alive, and whatever intelligence resided here had just decided to make its presence known. The hum returned, but this time it wasn't as violent. Instead, it was like a voice, a deep and ancient presence speaking directly to Alex's mind. The message was clear: "You are not alone." The crew stood in the aftermath of the strange light, feeling the air around them grow thick and heavy with an unknown presence. The glowing symbols on the wall had stopped shifting, but the silence in the cave was deafening. It was as if the entire world had paused, holding its breath, waiting for something. Alex's heart was pounding. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to take the crew and get as far away from this cursed place as possible. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not when there were answers to find. He glanced around at his team: Sharp, Emily, and the others. Their faces were a mixture of awe and fear. They, too, sensed that something had changed, something that would define the rest of their lives. "Are we safe?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would trigger something worse. Alex opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a low rumble echoed from the deep recesses of the cave. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the walls seemed to close in around them. "Move," Alex shouted, grabbing Emily's arm. "We need to get out of here, now." But it was too late. A series of sharp cracks sounded from all around them, followed by a strange mechanical whirring. The crew turned in every direction, searching for the source of the noise. Then, the floor beneath them shifted, and a loud grinding noise rang out as part of the wall slowly slid open, revealing a dark passage beyond. "What the hell?" Lieutenant Sharp muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a cave, it was a complex, and now it was coming to life. Whatever intelligence had designed this place had been dormant. Until now. Without thinking, Alex pulled his team toward the newly revealed passage. There was no time to waste. Whatever was happening, they were at the center of it, and it was too late to turn back. The air in the passage was cold, the walls slick with moisture. It smelled ancient, like something had been buried here for centuries. The flickering light from their torches barely illuminated the darkness, but every step they took seemed to echo too loudly in the silence. "Do you feel that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Alex nodded. The air around them felt charged with energy, like they were walking into the heart of a storm. The hum that had resonated in the cave had returned, softer now, but still present, guiding them deeper. As they moved further into the passage, Alex's thoughts raced. What was waiting for them at the end? And why had the planet seemed to wake up when they entered that cave? Was it connected to the planet's past, or to something far older, something that had been hidden away for millennia? The passage finally opened into another large chamber. This one was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. The walls were covered with more symbols, but they were different from the ones in the cave. These were more intricate, almost alive, flowing across the walls like a living language. At the far end of the chamber, a large stone structure stood. It resembled a throne, but there were no markings to suggest it was meant for anyone, or anything, human. Instead, it looked like it belonged to an ancient, almost forgotten civilization. "What is this place?" Lieutenant Sharp whispered. "I don't know," Alex answered, stepping forward. "But we're about to find out." As they neared the structure, the air around them grew heavier. A low, steady hum vibrated through the stone beneath their feet. The structure seemed to pulse with energy, like a heart beating in sync with the planet itself. And then, as if on cue, a voice filled the chamber. It wasn't spoken, it was felt, deep in their minds, a resonating presence that made Alex's skin crawl. "You have awakened me." The crew froze in place. The voice was not human. It wasn't even alien. It was something older, something beyond their understanding. "You," Alex began, but his voice faltered. "What are you?" The voice responded, its tone ancient and filled with power. "I am the Guardian. I have slept for eons. You are the ones who have disturbed my slumber." The words hit Alex like a punch to the chest. Guardian? What was this entity, and why had it been dormant for so long? Why have you been asleep?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity. The voice seemed to ponder her question, and then it spoke again, its tone filled with both regret and warning. "I have waited for the day when the one who would challenge me would arrive, and now that day has come. The planet was never meant to be your home. You have taken what was never meant to be yours. And for that, there will be a price." The chamber began to shake as the Guardian's words reverberated through the stone. Alex felt the ground beneath his feet tremble as if the entire planet was responding to the entity's call. "We need to leave," Sharp said urgently. "Now." But before they could move, the chamber was flooded with a bright, blinding light. The Guardian's presence grew stronger, and the entire structure seemed to vibrate with power. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the light faded. The crew was left in stunned silence, their hearts racing. The Guardian's warning hung in the air like a promise. There was no going back now. Whatever had been awakened on this planet was about to set into motion something that could change the course of humanity's future. "Let's go," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. "We've got a lot of answers to find." The crew turned and began to move quickly, their minds racing with the implications of what had just happened. The planet had spoken, and they had no idea what kind of force they had just unleashed. But one thing was certain. The battle for survival had only just begun. As the crew sprinted out of the chamber, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on them like a heavy blanket. Their hearts raced, not just from the physical exertion, but from the fear that the Guardian's ominous warning had left behind. "We need to get to the ship," Alex said, his voice tight. "We can't stay here any longer." Emily, her eyes wide with panic, nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. What if it's not over? What if that thing follows us?" Alex didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. His mind was racing. He wasn't sure if the Guardian's words had been a threat or a warning. Either way, the consequences were clear. Humanity had crossed a line, and the planet, whatever it truly was, had reacted. The walls of the passage began to hum again, this time more loudly. The faint vibration beneath their feet returned, stronger now, as if the entire planet was beginning to wake up in response to their actions. Every step they took felt heavier, like they were being pulled down into a dark abyss. "Come on," Sharp shouted, pulling Emily forward. "Move faster." The crew hurried through the winding corridors, the sense of urgency growing with each passing moment. Behind them, the hum became a low, vibrating roar, and the ground began to shake more violently. It felt as though something was moving beneath their feet, something enormous and powerful. Suddenly, there was a sound, like the earth itself cracking open. The walls ahead of them began to shift, and a new passage revealed itself, a dark, gaping maw that beckoned them forward. But Alex knew better than to trust it. "Don't go that way," he shouted, grabbing Sharp's arm. "We need to go back the way we came." But it was too late. From the shadows emerged something massive, something ancient. A great beast, its body covered in scales that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural light. Its eyes glowed with an unearthly intensity, and its massive wings unfurled, casting an immense shadow over the crew. It was like nothing Alex had ever seen. No animal, no creature in all of human history could compare to this thing. It was something born of a time before humanity, a creature of legend and myth. And it was awake. "Run!" Alex screamed. The crew scattered, instinct taking over. They turned to flee, but the beast was fast, too fast. With a deafening roar, it lunged toward them, its claws scraping against the stone floor, sending sparks flying into the air. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted ahead, not daring to look back. The air was thick with the beast's presence, a presence that felt almost alive, like the entire planet was part of it. "Over here," Sharp shouted, pulling open a side passage. "This way." Alex didn't hesitate. He darted down the new corridor, but the walls seemed to close in around them. The passage was narrow, and the low, guttural growl of the beast was growing louder with each step. "We're not going to make it," Emily panted. "It's too fast." "Keep moving," Alex barked, his voice full of desperation. "There's a door at the end. We can reach it." They pushed forward, but the ground shook again, stronger this time, and the air became heavier, almost suffocating. Alex could feel the planet's energy building, like it was preparing for something catastrophic. Then, without warning, the beast appeared before them, blocking the exit. It was too close now, its massive form filling the corridor. It was more terrifying up close, its jaws dripping with saliva, its breath hot and foul. "We're trapped," Sharp said, his voice a mixture of fear and disbelief. The creature snarled, and Alex could feel the vibrations in his bones. It wasn't just a predator, it was the embodiment of the planet itself, an ancient force awakened from its slumber. And they were its prey. "We're not dead yet," Alex said, forcing himself to think clearly. "Get ready." The creature roared again, shaking the walls. In that moment, Alex knew that their only hope of survival was to fight back. They might have been on its turf, but they were humans. And if there was one thing they had learned over centuries of survival, it was that they would never go down without a fight. Emily raised her rifle, her hands trembling. Sharp did the same. They aimed at the beast, but they knew it wouldn't be enough. They had to buy themselves time to escape. "On my mark," Alex said. "We hit it with everything we've got. Ready?" The crew nodded, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They were scared, yes, but they were also determined. They weren't going down without a fight. They had made it this far. They weren't going to let a monster stop them now. Alex stepped forward, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. This was it, the final stand. They had no choice but to face the nightmare head-on. "Now," Alex shouted. The crew opened fire, the sound of gunshots ringing in the narrow corridor. The beast howled in fury, rearing back, its glowing eyes filled with rage. But just as quickly as it had appeared, the creature lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air. And in that moment, Alex realized the truth. The battle they were about to fight wasn't just for survival. It was for humanity's future. The corridors reverberated with the deafening sound of gunfire. Alex could feel his pulse in his ears as his crew fought to hold back the monstrous creature. The beast's eyes glowed with an unnatural fury, and every slash of its claws sent shockwaves through the ground beneath them. It was a nightmare, something far beyond anything they had prepared for. But Alex knew one thing for sure. They couldn't back down now. Not when the future of humanity depended on their survival. He glanced at Emily and Sharp. Both of them were fighting hard, their weapons flashing as they fired in tandem with the roar of the beast. "Keep firing," Alex shouted over the chaos, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to slow it down." Emily's face was a mask of determination. Her hands were steady despite the panic of their situation. She fired again and again, aiming for the creature's massive form. But the beast was relentless. Each shot they landed seemed to only make it angrier, its thick scales absorbing the blows with little effect. Sharp was gritting his teeth, his focus narrowed. He ducked beneath a wild swipe from the beast's claws and fired from the ground. "We're not going to last long at this rate," he muttered. "We don't have a choice," Alex replied, grimly. "We need to find its weak point." But the more they shot, the more the creature seemed to evolve in response to their attack. It was adapting, learning. The realization struck Alex with cold clarity. They weren't just fighting a beast. They were fighting the planet itself, a force that had existed for centuries, if not millennia, and was now fully awake. "We can't keep this up," Emily said, breathless. "It's too strong." Alex's mind raced, searching for a solution. Any way out of this? He had to think fast. The creature was growing stronger with every passing moment, and if they didn't do something drastic, they would be its next meal. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but urgent, "do you remember the old weapons from the ship? The experimental energy projectiles?" Emily's eyes widened as she understood what Alex was suggesting. "You think we can use them on this thing? It's our only chance," Alex said, his gaze fixed on the creature as it advanced toward them. The beast was getting closer, its glowing eyes fixated on them like it was savoring the moment before the final strike. Sharp swore under his breath. "This better work," he muttered, turning to sprint toward the supply room. Alex and Emily followed closely behind, adrenaline fueling their movements as they dashed through the winding corridors. Behind them, the beast's roars echoed through the ship, as if it knew they were trying to escape. The sound sent shivers down their spines, but they didn't dare stop to look back. Finally, they'd reached the supply room. Emily quickly grabbed the energy projectiles, her fingers flying over the controls to activate them. The devices hummed with a bright, powerful energy, exactly what they needed to take down the beast. Alex didn't hesitate. He motioned to Sharp, "Get into position. We'll fire from here." As the crew set up the weapons, the sounds of the beast's movements grew louder. It was almost upon them, its claws scraping against the metal walls as it closed in. They had no time to lose. Emily's hands shook slightly as she loaded the projectiles into the launcher. She looked up at Alex, determination in her eyes. "If this works, we're not just stopping the beast, we're stopping the planet's reaction. We have to be ready for anything." Alex nodded, tightening his grip on his weapon. "Just focus on the shot. We can't afford to miss." The seconds felt like hours as they waited, their bodies tense and ready for the final confrontation. The ship groaned under the weight of the creature's presence, the sound of its movements echoing throughout the hull. It was closing in too fast. Then, without warning, the creature's massive form appeared at the entrance, its wings unfurled, and its mouth open in a terrifying roar. It was right there, ready to strike. "Now!" Alex shouted. Emily fired. The energy projectiles shot forward with blinding speed, a brilliant blue beam streaking through the air toward the beast. The creature roared in pain as the shot hit its side, and for a split second, time seemed to freeze. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, knocking the creature back and creating a massive explosion of energy. The beast howled in agony, its form flickering and warping under the intensity of the energy blast. But it didn't fall. Instead, it fought harder, more furious than before. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The planet itself wasn't just sending a creature after them. It was sending its entire force, its very essence, to protect itself from the invaders. "We need more power," Sharp yelled, desperation in his voice. "Do it," Alex commanded. Emily quickly adjusted the energy launcher, calibrating it for a larger blast. They only had one more chance to take it down, and this time, they couldn't afford to fail. Alex aimed his weapon, his hand steady despite the chaos around them. They couldn't miss. The creature roared again, charging them with a fury that shook the ground. But just as it lunged, Emily fired the second shot. The explosion was blinding. It felt like the entire ship had been engulfed by a sudden wave of force. The beast's final scream echoed through the corridors before everything went silent. For a moment, no one moved. The crew stood frozen, hearts racing, waiting for any sign that the creature had been defeated. The air was thick with tension. Then, slowly, the dust settled. The beast's form, once so terrifying and powerful, lay motionless on the ground. They had done it. But Alex knew one thing. This was far from over. The planet was still alive, still reacting. And now, the real fight for humanity's survival was about to begin.